Hi, I'm Marcia Lehman and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. Today we'll be pruning a Viburnum. Now when you look at the handout, you'll see that there are about 150 varieties of Viburnum. And in this particular case, this plant is in a native plant bed, so we assume it is a native to Southeast US. We also believe it is a compact variety. It's been in the ground since 2017. It's now 2022, so it's 5 years old in this spot. So it was a couple-year-old plant when it went in the ground. It has not been pruned in the 5 years it's been here. That's not a big no-no because viburnums need very light pruning, if any pruning whatsoever. So the focus really is on removing any suckers, getting rid of the 4Ds, dead, diseased, damaged, or dysfunctional. And so, yeah, this is not a renovation pruning. This is really the type of light pruning that viburnums normally get. And the key is, since they do bloom in the spring, you prune them after they have finished flowering. And you are hard-pressed here. You'll find an occasional little white flower left on the plume, but for the most part, this is finished flowering. You want to prune it within 6 to 8 weeks after it's finished flowering, because after that 6 to 8 week period, it will start to form blooms for next year's flowers. So if you wait till fall to prune it, you could be taking off some of next year's flowers, and you don't want to do that. So let me step out of the picture for a moment, and I'll try and zoom in and give you a close-up of what some of these spent flowers look like. I'm not going to bother to deadhead them today. That's totally up to you. What I'll be focused on in the pruning is getting down, starting at the bottom, seeing if there are any suckers. And they can be a multi-stemmed shrub, but sometimes they're a single stem. So we'll get down and we'll look at the bottom and see what we have. And then we'll work our way up, focusing on getting rid of the 4Ds. And in this case, anything that may be crossing, rubbing, starting to make a wound that would open it up to disease and the like. So I don't expect to have a big pile of debris when we're done, but I do expect the plant to be a little thinner through the middle when we finish. So let me step out of the photo for a moment, zoom in on some of these spent flowers, and just give you a closer look at the plant. I'm just over 5 feet tall, so this thing is now maybe about 7 feet tall. We are never going to top it. We're never going to take hedge trimmers to it. We're going to go in and selectively prune, so most of the cuts will be made with my sanitized pruners or perhaps the long-handled loppers. I did bring the saw with me today, but I don't expect to use it. So again, let me step out of the picture. I'll zoom in on some of the spent flowers, and then we'll get to work. As we do in most of our pruning videos, we start at the bottom, and in this case I'm on the back side of the shrub. You may or may not be able to see me very well, but you can still hear me. And the first thing I see back here is that this is a multi-stemmed. It's got 2 major stems coming out of the ground, and then it's got about a 1/2 inch diameter stem, which is a sucker that's been let go a couple of years. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove that sucker that had started to grow. So that's what that looked like. On the back side, not going to do real well. Then I'm going to, there are some very, very small spindly stems coming off low. So with my hand pruners, I'm going to get in and clean up a couple of those, especially the ones that want to grow straight up through the middle, because that's just going to block the middle. So we have a couple more in here that just want to grow straight up through the middle. The other thing that happens with the ones that grow straight up through the middle is they also tend to start to rub. And if you're doing this annually, you'll have a smaller pile of debris. As I said, this has been in the ground since 2017, and this is its first pruning. So I've got 5 years worth of little stuff that needs to be fixed. So we're just gonna snip away it. And if you find anything that's already dead, at this point, it's fully leafed out. The newer leaves have a lighter green color than the older leaves. And so if there's anything in here that's still brown, then it is definitely dead. And by definition, that can come out. So let me snip away here. And while we're down here, we find a volunteer of something else, not a viburnum. So that's definitely coming out. Again, if they're twisted, sometimes you can untwist them. Now that I've done that, they're not crossing rubbing anymore, so they can both stay. And I would also add that the back side of this does not have as much foliage, and that probably comes from the fact that there are trees right behind here that provide shade. And while viburnums will grow in the sun or partial shade, there's probably not quite enough sunlight on the back. So I'm going to hit pause, and I'm going to come around and work on the front a little bit, because the back is cleaned out about as much as I want to do, or as much as I think it needs. The back has been thinned out, and as I mentioned, there are some trees behind here, so the back's not getting quite as much sunlight, and it is not as full with foliage and flowers. So that's just the result of the location. Now we'll work on the front a little bit, and this is one of those where we are going to pull it apart and see where things are crossing, rubbing, need a little thinning for airflow. Again, I always like to start at the bottom. And there's one that's a little spindly thing that wants to grow up through the center. So we'll take that out. Not only was it going up through the center, but it went up through the center and then spread out and was starting to rub. So we'll take that out. And okay. We'll move our way up a little bit. We were talking about all the 150 varieties of viburnum. Many of them, but not all, have opposite branching. And this is a great example where this branch and this branch come off this stem directly opposite each other, and then there's one in the center. But if you don't know what variety you have, I strongly encourage you to refer to the Cornell identification key that's listed in the references. And it will ask you questions like, is it opposite or is it alternate branching? Does it drop all its leaves every year? Because some of them are evergreen, some of them are deciduous, and then there are some that are semi-evergreen. So they lose some of their leaves, but not all of their leaves. So the Cornell identification key is the best tool that I found in doing my research on this. And it is out of Cornell Cooperative Extension. Cornell is also a land-grant university, just like University of Tennessee is. There's also a good reference out of Clemson. And almost every reference will start to list varieties. And as I say, I used the Cornell identification key along with the few tidbits that I knew, for instance, that this was a native. So that allowed me to eliminate anything that said native to China or native to Japan, native to anywhere in Asia. That narrowed down the number of species that it could be. I was also led to believe that it was a compact variety, so that allowed me to reduce the possibilities a little further. And came down to, I think, based on the identification key, that this is a compact arrowwood viburnum. I could be wrong, but the good news is that viburnums get pruned all the same way. So it's a light pruning every year, focused really on the 4 Ds, anything dead, damaged, diseased, or dysfunctional. That means if I was worried about somebody having to mow along here and getting whacked in the face, well then I would take out that branch that's going to whack them. But as you can see, the things I'm taking out here in the front are small, and I'm focused on things that appear dead or that are growing back into the center and will eventually cross and create a rubbing situation. So now it's really just a little bit of thinning for airflow and sunshine. And when I'm done, it probably won't look very different, which means I did a good pruning job. If you could walk by and say, oh yeah, that thing got pruned recently, then I probably would have done a bit of a hatchet job. And we don't want to do that. So a good pruning job, the plant looks healthy, and unless you get up close and see the individual little pruning cuts, you would never know that it had been pruned. It just looks really good. And frankly, I think I'm almost done. This is the type of thing where later in the week when I come back to this garden, I may look at it and say, oh yeah, there's one more I should have taken. And again, if it's in the 4 Ds, you can take that off any time of year. So let's get a little bit more airflow in the center, and then we'll call it quits. Here is the finished pruning job. And it really doesn't look very different from when it started. That's good. And the pile of debris from that 7 or 8 foot tall shrub is right here. One handful, one little bundle. Not much debris at all, just thinning it out, getting rid of anything dead, crossing, rubbing, and we'll be back next year. Light pruning, a light touch-up each spring after they have finished flowering is really all you need to keep it looking healthy and keep it actually being healthy. Not just looking healthy, but being healthy. Thank you for joining us today. See you again.